Welcome to the Morphosis, where we explore transformation at the intersection of soul and system, and where wellness meets technology. I'm your host, Juri, and today's guest is Dr. Steve Gullans, a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and co-author of Evolving Ourselves, a book that reshaped how I see human change. His message is simple but powerful. Evolution isn't just something behind us, it's unfolding right now in real time. That idea hit home for me during what I now call my reset, a retreat that brought me back to silence, breath, and nature. Through stillness, cold, and deep nervous system work, I began to feel a shift, a way to access a deeper operating system within myself. Not through thinking, but through listening. That journey actually started earlier, during my time in the quantified self movement in Amsterdam, tracking sleep, heart rate variability, and even emotions. But it was never about the numbers. It was about knowing myself, because self-awareness is the foundation for conscious evolution. And that brings us to today's conversation, where Steve and I will explore the brain as the next frontier, emotional intelligence in a tech-driven world, how AI and wearables can help us train our inner systems, and what it means to design inclusive tools that empower everyone, including the neurodiverse. This is a conversation about the next human frontier, not of machines, but of minds, hearts, and deeper consciousness. So take a breath, tune in, and let's begin. I'd love to begin our conversation with what it means to evolve in real time. And I suppose if we talk about evolution, it sometimes sounds like it's something from a distant past. In evolutional times, it's, as you said before, we're evolving in real time. So how do you see that playing out, Steve, and especially in our brains and behaviors?
So in terms of evolution and humans, our species, we're in an interesting place in time because the world is changing very quickly. And the traditional understanding when you go to a textbook or you're in school is evolution takes millennia, years, decades, a very long time. Species do not happen overnight in the eyes of any evolutionary biologist. But it turns out that there's two types of evolving, and I call it adaptation. One is the very slow and DNA mutations that penetrate through the society. For example, the cystic fibrosis mutation enables you to survive cholera, and that became very widespread, or the sickle cell mutation allows you to survive malaria. Those are directly mutations, but in fact, nature's smart. Nature's had 3.5 billion years on this planet. If there's a very rapid change in our world, locally, globally, or anything else, there would be no species left if there wasn't the ability to adapt quickly. We can go all the way back to Darwin's example of finches. If they're living on an island that's relatively dry for a couple of years, they actually get very thick beaks to break open the seeds that have a hard shell. And then 1 year of very large rainfall, in the course of one generation, they'll have beaks that are more gentle. They don't need to spend all that energy making it. And this idea in nature that things can happen quickly has been observed in many plants and animals. And we're seeing it in real time today as global warming becomes a consequence. One consequence is not every species survives. And the other is that species adapt by finding new behaviors or finding new traits. These are all examples of ways to adapt. And in terms of rapid evolution, it has been ignored quite a bit. It's a field called epigenetics. It's not your DNA. It's actually a code written on top of it, which just enables the individual to adapt over the course of years, or for the next generation to come into the world ready for a time of famine, which their parents may not have had, or for a time of infectious diseases, or whatever it may be. Again, it's an evolutionarily driven process that for a species to survive, it has to come into a world and adapt to a world to move on.
So do you think then, or do you see the conditions such as ADHD or anxiety as an adaptation of society, the world's evolving faster than our biology?
That's right. So remember, humans as a species have been here about 250,000 years ago. So for only the last couple of hundred years have we seen our modern society. So for a couple of 100,000 years, we've had to adapt to cold climates, famines, and everything else. And as a result, our biological mechanism inherently created to the everyday kind of changes that occurred thousands of years ago. Now try this for size. Suddenly you move indoors for 90% of your life. You have heat and air conditioning, so the temperature is always perfect. You have a nice, comfortable bed. You're not running from predators every day of your life. You have many, many changes. The infectious diseases have largely been eliminated in the US and the UK and places like that because of vaccines and other things. So our bodies should be expected to change. And we're always shocked when we say, gee, we have plenty of food. I wonder why everybody's obese. Why are there so many allergens? Meanwhile, kids that grow up in rural areas on farms where they're exposed to a very, quote, dirty environment don't have the same incidence of allergies. It's our pristine, hygienic environment that does this. In fact, if you move from the UK to southern US, you're going to have allergies to pollens that you never saw when you were growing up. These were not necessary in the old days. And so the consequences we see, and they need not all be bad. I mean, obviously, we're living longer. We have food available all the time. In fact, there's something known as the Flynn effect, where humans have naturally become smarter and we're healthier. So there's a lot of reasons to celebrate, but to say we don't understand what's going on is a little odd. And to come back finally to ADHD, our brains are rapidly evolving in everyday life. By evolving, I simply mean we learn to live in the world we're in. If you wake up one morning and you're suddenly in an environment that's very toxic, your brain changes the way it adapts and lives within that environment. If you want to learn how to play music, you go to the piano every day and practice, and your brain adapts. If you need to learn a new language because you moved, your brain adapts. It has ways to learn new skills that compensate for the changes in the world as you go along. And in the ADH case, what are we talking about? We're talking about decreasing attention span, loss of the ability to focus, stay in the zone, and show inhibitory control so you're not interrupting anyone. Well, for the last 20 years, we've had continuous interruptions, 100, 200, 3 times a day. We've been training our brains to be interrupted by our phones, by the television. So there's no doubt that attention is a problem globally for adults and kids.
And that kind of spurred me on to, I think it was about 10 years ago when I looked into the quantified self movement in Amsterdam at the time. I was trying to capture as many data sets, biometric data sets as I could, whether it was my productivity, my sleep, my heart rate variability, and even emotions at that particular time. But now in hindsight, I think it was never really about the numbers on its own. It was about knowing myself and creating self-awareness. How do you see that from your perspective, being active in neurotech? How do you see tech helping us to train and not just track our evolution?
I'm currently working in the neurotech field, trying to bring new technologies forward that across many domains that will help us all. Generally diseases or anything else, although there's opportunity in all of those places. We're talking about technologies that have arisen because of miniaturization and cost reduction in AI, in making wearables and making things that you can do very easily. Even just looking at your blink rate with your phone can tell you a lot, or the wearables we have at home. And the quantified self movement that came out of Silicon Valley was really an effort to try to create these wearables and track what we do. Well, tracking is great, but it has its limits. We are not even sure what it means half the time. There's a debate about how many steps a day is the right number of steps to have.
10,000.
7,000. That came out about a month ago. Before that, it was 10,000. But is it the same for somebody who lives in the north and the south versus older or younger? It's really an individual metric that matters. And more fundamentally, tracking is wonderful. Yeah. But if you just tracked your glucose every day and didn't treat, you wouldn't have your insulin for diabetics. So you have to have something that actually can adjust your biology through training in your brain and other approaches to actually adapt to this world.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of looked at those tools, whether it's the Aura ring for hardware variability. And I also have one of these Meta glasses, which basically are my personal AI. So if I have points in my day that I'm just overwhelmed or I'm stuck with particular type of questions to the side of my temple, and I activate a conversation with it. So a utility that I tap into literally every day. And it's not just to outsource my mind, but to learn, I suppose, my patterns. I look at my sleep pattern, I look at my activity pattern, and I'm looking at my conversations on a daily basis with myself. I went into nature and I began to stimulate my parasympathetic part of the nervous system, consciously drop into a more subconscious state, more reflective state. And that's for me, through the help of technology, create more clarity, purely as presence, being there at present. And I think that was a very profound moment for me. And I believe that emotional awareness, in this case, supported with the wearables, can help us regulate from the inside out, using feedback reflection. Maybe you have a moment in your life that you've gone through the realization of feedback and how profound that was for yourself.
Like you, I love technology. I love quantifying things, and I particularly enjoy tracking my own numbers on my health and wellness. I've actually taught my grandkids how to read graphs by looking at my heart rate, for example. So at a point in my life where I was quite stressed, and my family encouraged me to go to the John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness course, which was a 10-week event. So the idea is everybody sits in a class, a quiet room, and you get an instructor and you listen and you go into a meditative state with some training. A couple of things struck me. Number one, I was horrible at it. I soon learned that snoring was not a form of meditation when the teacher kicked me gently to say, wake up. And on top of that, I never knew if I was actually in the right state or not. There was no independent event. If I get on a scale and say, did I lose weight? I can look and say, yeah, I lost 2 pounds yesterday. And so I needed an objective approach. I was speaking with a professor there named Dr. Judd Brewer, who ran the program. He whistled me into his lab and put me on a biofeedback system that really taught you how to get into a meditative state. It was part of a small study. He had fMRIs, but the equipment and the setup costs probably $10,000-$15,000. There were 2 technicians there to help me. That is not something to lost.
If we understand, are we talking 10 years ago?
It's about 10 years ago, yes.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was the revelation, like you were talking about yourself. If I had a feedback system, if I had a way of knowing what the meditative state feels like, I could actually have a shot at getting there. And I know I could do it more quickly because in a matter of weeks, I was actually able to get to a level of meditation I didn't know existed. It was bliss. It was no effort to stay there. And I suspect that most people who meditate don't even get to that state because I had a tone that I was hearing that would change its pitch according to my brain waves. And as my brain calmed down into the meditative state we were looking for, the tone would get lower and lower. And it was just restful. It was frankly 0 effort, unlike your first class in meditation where you're trying to clear your thoughts. It's very difficult. So I had a wonderful experience. And with that, I actually set out to find some other ways to do it.
Okay, so you found other ways to do it as well. You didn't necessarily need that tool to get you to that state. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, at the time I was investing in life science companies, tech companies. I was an investor at that point in my life. And I had the ability to go to any young technology or scientific lab and ask them what they were working on. By and large, everybody was working on a tool to measure your state, but nobody had to put the feedback loop in. And on top of that, they were trying to commercialize something. They were looking at diagnosis of Parkinson's or whatever disease you might have. I actually found a technology called Think, T-H-Y-N-K, a technology that I brought a team together to acquire to bring out to the world, not for any particular disease or condition, which is not just measuring your brain waves, but training your brain with 13 cognitive skills that we could all improve.
Wow, that's very powerful, I can imagine. And is that something that's already available right now? Is that something that's being tested as we speak or rolled out as a product?
The way it works is there's a simple headset that you wear. It can look scary to some people, but it's no different than a microphone you talk into. It's just listening to your brain. No data acquired, and we should talk about some neural rights later. But the idea is that your brain waves are then, just as the tone in the feedback system I did for meditation, are controlling a video game on an iPad, an adventure game like Temple Run or Subway Surfer. And our team has put together a series of challenges to teach you to focus, to teach you self-inhibition so you're not interrupting your coworkers, to actually teach you to sit quietly. And we see two things in our studies. We see large behavior changes, particularly in individuals who are just a little too rambunctious. We have no idea if they're diagnosed with ADHD today, although our first 8 studies were conducted as clinical trials for ADHD and performed about equal to therapeutic drugs. In addition to behavior changes, we're actually seeing transfer of this ability to focus and concentrate into real world achievements for students in all settings, inner cities, suburbs, private, at home, and everything else. We've seen students accelerate a year on average in math and reading on standardized tests after playing the game for 1 hour a week for 6 weeks.
Wow.
In adults, we've seen reduced anxiety. They're getting their work done at the end of the day. They're able to defocus from their phone every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
There's some changes.
Yeah. I think it's very important, and I see myself as my own test case in many ways. I've self-diagnosed myself with ADHD. I've got an assessment on my desk, literally right now, which I'm looking at and think it's got to be a test of certain things, questions, and something will come out. But what then? I already know that I've got an attention deficit, so I don't necessarily need an assessment as well. And especially not because I'll probably get a particular prescription from that point onwards. I've got a label and a prescription, and I don't want to have that prescription of medication. And this is why I'm trying so hard to find the tools to get me to calibrate in a way, if that makes sense, and to get me into that deep state of focus. As we all evolve now in society, as we discussed in the beginning, we seem to move faster than biology can keep up. So it's kind of constantly playing catch up and calibrate.
In everyday life, we seem to live with our phones. We're adapting to the real world of always on the move, always too busy, multitasking beyond belief. In fact, we're not very good at multitasking. We really can only focus on one at it. But there are consequences. Students struggling in school, people having problems with their coworkers. I've even talked to surgeons who say young surgeons are not very good if the surgery is sustained. They don't have that ability to stay in that mindful thought, or Top Gun pilots or NFL quarterbacks, or you name it. There's a point in life where you need to sit down and pay attention. And so the way I view it is not unlike having the ability to speak French and English. There's 2 parts of your brain in terms of focus and impulse control, and we're even working memory. There's one that says, I need to do a lot of things in a hurry, adapt to 15 emails simultaneously. And we've gotten good at that because that's what we do. That's our adaptation. But we've lost that pathway in our minds that allows us to just sit down, shut off those hyper-connected worlds, and just sit down and focus and do that surgery or get my work done by the end of the day. We need both. And it appears right now we're training all day long in the hyper-disrupted world. We also need to focus and pay attention to how to train in the other part of the world as well.
Yeah, beautifully said. So how do we then intentionally design AI or emerging technologies in general to support for a more conscious evolution?
I'm just going to confine most of my thoughts here around the field of behavioral health. AI is a very big space. There have been a lot of red flags thrown up, and I'm part of the neuro rights community thinking about how we can safeguard our thoughts and our futures. But in the behavioral health space, we're very poor at changing people's behaviors, going on a diet, quitting smoking, going to the gym, countless things that we're just not good at. AI actually is going to be a very welcome approach to it. As you were pointing out earlier in the podcast, it's an assistant who's your trusted assistant when you get the privacy and everything right. Someone you can talk to, you can bounce ideas off of. Imagine you have a world where there's a wearable saying, you know what? You're possibly headed to an anxiety event in the next 30 minutes. I've seen technologies like this. Take some corrective action. Well, the AI can say, all right, Juri, why don't you sit down? This is your favorite music. Listen to this music right now. That would really help you, because it's not on your mind to say, I need a little bit of a break to listen to music. So this accompanying guardian who's looking out for our best interests is a very, very good way to think about this in the behavioral health spaces.
I suppose it listens into my biometrics, right? So then you're kind of looking at the quantified self movement meets the conscious AI space and tune into where I sit on the spectrum. I'm conscious of the influx of data and the impulses, etc. If you could leave one insight for the next generation about brain evolution, inner awareness, or something else, what would it be?
It's an interesting time in history. We're in the midst of a revolution with AI, but we've had revolutions before, whether it was the Industrial Revolution, the Transportation Revolution, the Internet Revolution, IT, go all the way back to the invention of reading and writing. And there's always contrarian views of it. Change is horrible, change is going to be a problem, and it does disrupt economic to people's situations in life, for good and for bad. As a grandfather now, I look at the coming generations. I see the 20-year-olds whom I often coach as struggling to say, how am I going to fit into this AI world? All I read in the media is jobs are going to disappear. Well, there's always been more jobs following a revolution than there were before, and under better living conditions, i.e. a 3-day work week will be very welcome. And as I look at my grandkids in particular, I want them to grow up to be curious, not be afraid of innovative new things, to be educated as you are. That's one of the big failings of all behavioral health, all health in general. People are not educated about their health. They can't even tell you what conditions they have necessarily when they're sick. So when you're trying to ask someone to do something when they're well, it's even harder. And so I think by learning and educating and moving well into this domain, with some gentle guidance, you need to find trusted people, people I know, who can help you. This is the way you want to start doing this. You don't want to be cheating in school. You want to embellish your writing by adding some art to it or something else. And so I see the number one skill that's ahead of everybody is creativity. STEM is wonderful, but many of the STEM jobs are going to disappear, programming and things like that. We're going to enter an era of creativity. So I highly encourage my grandkids, play music, use AI to write music. We try to think of things to invent because it's fun to be creative. And that's really going to be the blessing in disguise for this future generation. They're going to have creative, inventive ways to do things without the worry about the execution with AI and robots and everything else out there. I'm so excited for them.
Interestingly enough, and it's something I do more often with my daughters, she's 9. So she started to sit behind my desk and she wanted to do a presentation for me, because she knows what I'm involved in. She admires all the things, as young as she is, what I do. She was building a visual storyboard using AI to express her feelings. She could speak into it, and she could express her feelings about what she wanted to talk about. It reminded me of that movie Inside Out from Pixar, where sort of emotions are characters in a way, right? And I'm trying to teach her how to best deal with the emotions, that she can work with the emotions and not be ruled by them, for instance. It opened up an entire world for her because she was speaking to it in a very simple, playful language. Something really beautiful appeared on the screen. So for her, it opened up her imagination, or it actually visualized her imagination in such a profound way that I just sat there and I thought, yeah, this does work. And of course, we have the moral questions and the ethical side to us. Is this right? Is it right to give your daughter, your grandkids, a level of self-awareness? I think so. Is it okay to give them a new form of creativity and tools? I think so. But still, the society is very fearful for what we're doing and or what's happening with AI in general. Is that the unknown? Or is that just rooted in society and humanity that we are scared of change?
Yeah, we've always been scared of change as a species, as a culture, and there's always people who push the envelope. You need trusted guardians along the way. I think we got it wrong in terms of misunderstanding the power of social media, and so we learned a lot from that. A paper just came out this week saying if cell phones are available in school, kids spend 1 hour a day on the phone in high school. How are they going to sit down and do their test 2 minutes later? They're not. And so the idea of imposing certain regulations at the individual or group level, my grandkids are in a school system where the parents band together and say, the first phone is a flip phone and you're only at the age of 13. The parents have to equally be engaged. Their kids are going to adopt this. So why would you block access to it or give them over access to it? Neither one of those is ideal. You need a little bit of a shepherd along the way.
Yeah.
But what I'll say is everybody I talk to in the world is all in on helping the future generation. That's the beauty of what we're doing at Think. We're actually starting in schools right now. That's the first place we're working. Everybody I talk, doesn't matter, India, Asia, anywhere, all demographics, all politics, all sizes of wealth, says, I want to help. I want to join. I want to be part of this. And I think we can get it right by working together. There will always be rogue states and rogue individuals, but that's always been true. We just have to find a way to be comfortable with change and actually adopt it in very sane and rational ways.
That is a beautiful final thought.
That is it. Be curious, embrace innovation, and be judicious. It'll be a great future together.
And as we close, I'm left with a simple truth. We're not just adapting to technology, we're evolving through it. But the real evolution, it begins within. Whether it's tracking our sleep, training our focus, or just learning to listen to our breath. We're all upgrading our inner systems, step by step. Steve reminded us today that the brain is the next frontier, not to control, but to understand, to empower. And in that awareness, we find agency, we find compassion, we find the tools to shape a better version of ourselves and a better future for those who come next. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious, and keep evolving.